Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. This episode we have Netflix 188th film from 2019. It's the epic war film The King, directed by David Michod. It stars Timothee Chalamet, Joel Edgerton, Robert Pattinson, Lily Rose Depp, Sean Harris, and Ben Mendelsohn. I'm Jesse, and as always, here with MJ. How are you?
I am very well, very much looking forward to talking about a film that was really big when it came out. And then I did want to watch it when it came out, as is the case. I didn't get around to it. And I'm like, it's coming up on the podcast. And here we are, nearly midway through 2022. And, and I watched it.
Good. Yeah, I've seen this one, so it's a rewatch for me. And yeah, we'll see if my original thoughts hold up on this one, I guess.
I'm curious to see that, because not only had you seen it, you'd written a review on Letterboxd, a brief review. So I'm aware of your general thoughts, and then let's see what happens on the rewatch for you.
Good. Well, we always start with our fast flicks, where we do our quick summary of what this one is all about. So, what's The King in a short, succinct little summary from you?
Yeah, it's not a really short, succinct kind of movie, but in a nutshell, it's the story of Henry V as he is suddenly sworn in to become king, and how he tries to unite a kingdom full of unrest.
I like that. It's nice. Sort of similar sort of things, I guess. I've just said it's a reimagining of the rise of King Henry V during the early 15th century.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to go. Yeah, I mean there's so much more to the movie than what can be said in 12 words.
True. Yeah. This one, we like to sort of see the background story behind the films that we talk about, and this one has a pretty good story, and I know that you're going to be able to summarize this wonderfully, but we'll see if I have anything left over once you're done. Fill us in on how The King came to Netflix.
I'll leave some gaps for you, because there is a little bit here, but let's try and keep it brief. But it is interesting, you're right. So 2013 was when we first learned that Joel Edgerton and David Michod, two Australians, might I add, they had collaborated together. They wrote an adaptation of Shakespeare's Henriade plays. So Henry IV Parts 1 and 2 and Henry V. So they've sort of just grabbed this stuff that Shakespeare's already done and made their own, really loose adaptation of it. And they did this for Warner Brothers at the time. So a couple of years later, obviously they'd done a bit of work. It was announced that Michod would direct the project, which makes a lot of sense. Warner Brothers were going to be producing and distributing the film. Lava Bear were also producing it. Fast forward, 3 years? So February 2018 is when we next learned some information on it. And that's when Timothee Chalamet joined the cast. I think at that time, he'd just done Call Me By Your Name. Still wasn't much of a household name. Hadn't really fully taken over a film as a star. So this was his big chance. Brad Pitt on board producing with his production company under the Plan B Entertainment banner. And at that point, Netflix had come on as a distributor instead of Warner Brothers. So then they filmed it. Principal photography began on the 1st of June 2018, wrapped on the 24th of August. That's a pretty decent shoot. The filming took place throughout England, in Hungary. Many scenes were filmed on location at Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire. Lincoln Cathedral was used in place of Westminster Abbey for those coronation scenes. The Battle of Agincourt, which obviously is the main battle in the film, that was filmed in 2 weeks. Took 2 weeks for it to film. 300 men, 80 horses in a field in Hungary. They obviously had to achieve that muddy battlefield, which was key to the story. So the crew would let horses just continuously run over it, and the weather was so hot the mud kept drying up in between takes, so they moved the battlefield to the left and they did the same process again. The logistics of filming stuff like this would just be brutal. Had its premiere at the Venice Film Festival on the 2nd of September 2019. It screened at the BFI London Film Festival on the 3rd of October 2019 and received limited release on the 11th of October in cinemas before being released on Netflix for streaming on the 1st of November 2019, which is obviously when most people saw it. The last thing that I will mention without going into too much detail is that the film was heavily criticized for being widely inaccurate to both reality and the Shakespearean play. We can go through some of the main thing being, which I find really interesting, King Henry or Hal in the film, just kind of nothing like he was in the film. He was a bit of a warrior. He was war-hardened, battle-hardened before he became king. That's not the character that we see in this film. But there's a bunch of stuff there, and I don't think David Michod and Joel Edgerton are apologetic about that. This is their adaptation. They made the story they wanted to make.
Yeah, I think I guess I can touch on a few little other things, and we should put a spoiler alert out there too, because we're probably going to spoil a few things as we go. So if you haven't seen the film and want to check it out, give us a pause now. But I think the other sort of criticisms, I guess, was how sort of anti-French this film probably came across as for some people, and a few like character things like you mentioned that. Thomas, the brother, was never given the crown over Hal because he was an experienced fighter, as you mentioned, and a few of the dismissals of characters like William, he was dismissed for being too close to his father and things like that. So, a few things that
William was dismissed at the beginning as soon as Hal became king. So, like, he wasn't even a part of his regime at all. That's fascinating.
But I mean, I think. Yes, these are criticisms if you want a true adaptation, but this is a film. It's okay to like if you're going out making a story, it doesn't necessarily have to be 100% true or 100% follow the facts or 100% follow other adaptations of the story. Like this is their own version. So I think while they are criticisms, I think it's 100% okay to not have to worry about that and enjoy this for what it is as well.
They're not pretending that it is. That's the thing. No. They're not going out and saying this is even based or loosely based on it. That wasn't mentioned in anything that I read. It was just This is a movie with characters that you probably heard of, and this is our story.
Yeah, and the case of that is usually in a film you'll see inspired by true events. They didn't even bother with that. So I think that those criticisms sort of just need to be step back a little bit at times. As you mentioned earlier too, the idea we've got Australians on board with this, and I think it was an Australian-American co-production. So looking at the awards and the acclaim some of that the film received, it was sort of categorized as an Australian film and picked up a whole bunch of nominations at the Australian Film Industry Awards, which is the actors. I think it had 23 awards altogether from Australian Industry Awards, like nominations. So that's big. It won 4 of the actor awards, which are like the Australian equivalent of the Oscars or the BAFTAs, I guess, for best cinematography, best supporting actor for Joel Edgerton, best production, and costume design. So altogether, it was nominated for 40 awards across the world, and it won 12. So that's quite a lot of awards compared to some of the films that we have covered on this podcast. Timothee Chalamet, I thought that this was a nice little thing where he said his funniest moment or memory from this film was seeing Robert Pattinson all dressed up in his sort of armor and makeup, and he's vaping through his costume out on this set of this medieval type of experience. So that was cool. The characters, as we mentioned, like yes, they all existed in real life, apart from John, which I thought was interesting because he was sort of like a loosely based character that Shakespeare came up with too. This is the third film that we've done on this podcast with the word king in the title. I thought that was a cool little thing to sort of look at. We've done the Poker King and Outlaw King, yeah. And we've also had a few titles with royalty titles in them as well. Like we did a Christmas Prince, we did the Princess Switch, the Christmas Prince, the Royal Wedding, and in a couple of months we're going to do the Christmas Prince, the Royal Baby. So,
so 3 of them are the same film.
True sequels, but out of 180 films, that's 5 or 6 films that have had some sort of royalty in the title. So maybe a bit of a fascination with making stories to do with monarchs and things like that.
This did have an Outlaw King feel to it in some capacity. It felt like the bigger brother, better brother to it, but it did. I got Outlaw King vibes from this.
Yeah, the budget for this one was only 20 mil, which I thought was exceptionally well used. Yeah, 20 mil.
It's incredible.
Like you usually see like smaller sort of little indie films for that, like The Book Thief and The Hunt from last year. These little tiny productions that this looked a lot bigger than $20 million.
Absolutely, I'm staggered by that.
Yeah, crazy. translation, the only other sort of translation, the king across the world, except in Lithuania where it was King Henry, so a bit more specific. But it's very hard to. Or there's no real need to change the title for this one. There wasn't really a tagline either. There was like a subline almost on that poster. If you see the poster, where it's got the big title of the king, and then underneath in small text it says "All Hail." So nice little play on the words.
It didn't do much for me, that "All Hail."
Yeah. Interesting. All right. I guess we're ready to sort of talk about what the consensus is on this one.
Yeah, this is interesting, mainly because this film was pretty big when it came out. There was, as you mentioned, a lot of awards buzz about it. And this is at a point where Netflix was really pushing with this kind of stuff. I think it was pretty similar time to Marriage Story and The Irishman and The Two Popes, and all those films were meant to be their sort of awards fodder. So a lot of people have watched it, which is great. It's sitting at a 7.2 out of 10 on IMDb, and that's off the back of 121,000 ratings. That's a good score. It's a little bit lower on Letterboxd, 3.3 out of 5. Nearly 142,000 ratings. So huge results for the amount of people that watched on Letterboxd. And, 3.3 is nothing to be sneezed at. So it's pretty decent. I reckon they were probably hoping for higher scores and a bit more acclaim from it, but it's hard to be upset with it.
Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes, 145 critic reviews. So, like you said, a lot of people have seen this. Sits at 70%, so that's still fresh. The audience had it a little bit higher, and this is a big number for Rotten Tomatoes. More than 1,000 ratings from audience on Rotten Tomatoes, and sits at 83%. So, almost one of the higher ones there out of all of them, the audience on Rotten Tomatoes, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Early
5 years thing. This was big when it came out.
Your
early thoughts to me. You can't get a read on me, can you?
No.
I didn't mind it. I kind of thought it was pretty good. I can only get so excited by these kind of medieval war movies, the ideas of countries slowly moving forward, working out strategies, and then these big battle scenes. There was a time that I thought this film was purely going to go down that path, and I find that really kind of dull at times. But there was more to it. The film does offer more, probably thanks to its lead character. I actually enjoyed the ending and the ramifications of the decisions that he'd made, why they were made, and how Hal basically became a puppet and had no idea about it. I thought that was all really well done. So yeah, generally I thought it was pretty good.
Good, yeah. As I mentioned, I'd seen this before, had pretty good memories of it, enjoyed the rewatch. I think a historical war piece that sort of shows the grittiness of war, doesn't really glamorize it. It's got one of my favorite actors. I love Timothee Chalamet. And I think some of the ideas are pretty good in this film. So thumbs up from me.
Yep, cool.
Talk about some characters. This is like a ensemble sort of cast, really. And as you've mentioned, I guess our main protagonist that we follow throughout this whole thing is Hal, or King Henry. So let's kick it off.
Yeah, I think it's his morals that actually make this an interesting film. I'm still struggling to come to grips with this sort of drunken nobody that we meet at the beginning, being the same guy who tries to protect his brother from that battle at the start. Maybe we just didn't get enough of him, but that part didn't quite add up. But the guy who protected his brother is the man that we do see for the rest of the film. That jump just felt a bit jerky for me, and I don't buy it. But apart from that, I enjoyed seeing a leader who wasn't going to get drawn into the pettiness of politics. He was more interested in finding peace and unity than sort of defending one's honor via war. And it's almost even more interesting watching his ideals get slowly eroded, something that he appears oblivious to, and he sort of becomes a kill-at-all-costs operator. So seeing him listen to counsel and truly believe that he made the right decisions all along before recognizing that he'd been basically played to fulfill a role that he tried so hard to avoid. It felt like a really satisfying ending to this.
Good. Yeah, I like your sort of observations there on the idea that at the start he's probably a little bit too. Yeah, you don't really see that change in that character as well. But I like that it was sort of this up and down character where we see him sort of this wild, rebellious, partying, likes to sleep around. Sort of, he's really a kid. Like that's sort of how I sort of took him, I guess. And that tense relationship with the father, sort of highlights, like, you know, he's almost on this trend downwards to become a down and outer. But through his compassion, I guess, that we see through his brother, and even once he becomes king, the idea of he's sort of always looking out for his soldiers that are fighting for him. But on the other side, he's easily riled up. Like he can get angry quite quickly, even without thinking things through properly or seeing the full context of his decisions. But I do like throughout, like, we are reminded through John that Hal's he's not a killer. He's not deep down a horrible person. And that's probably a little bit of his youth as well. And I know this is a different version of the character, but he's inexperienced in the battlefield as well through this version of events, I guess. And I did enjoy, like, seeing him sort of depressed after his first sort of kill. And, you know, he doesn't have it in him to kill his prisoners, but sort of once, you know, this friendship that he's got with John, once that friendship is concluded through John's death, that transition straight away. Okay, kill them all. So, and that sort of led nicely into that final scene where he sort of fully takes ownership and goes, okay, I'm ready now. If people are going to tell me the truth, I'm ready to work with that truth and go from there. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag of character, very up, very down throughout, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily work on the screen. But I think probably my love of Timothee Chalamet is sort of made me just like engaged.
I think it works with this character just in general, though. He's not one-dimensional in any way, and I think the idea of being a leader makes the story more interesting if he is a little bit all over the place and he is learning and discovering and figuring out what to do next. That kind of makes it more interesting, as opposed to this happened and this happened and this happened and they had a war. Like, so that I think that works in general, and why the film works, full stop.
Yeah.
I found it interesting in real life, Henry VI, so this Henry's son, was made king when Henry V died, and he was like 2 months old. And this like 2-month-old was just king. Made king.
History's crazy.
From all reports, not a bad king. Like, obviously, for the first few years of his life, he wasn't making many decisions, but it's just insanity, isn't it?
It's crazy. It seems like a completely different world almost.
I mean, it is. It really is. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about Big Sir John Falstaff. I thought Joel Edgerton was so good in this role, and I maybe it's because we know Joel Edgerton, and this highlights his versatility. But his character was just so engaging, to the point where he was the one that I googled at the end of the movie to find out, okay, what's the true story of Sir John Falstaff? And I was gutted to discover that he is a fictional character that was created by Shakespeare. I think he's based loosely on a character on a person. But yeah, I was so disappointed to read that. But I just loved his honesty. I loved his humor. I loved his ability to not take himself too seriously, but also have a very strong sense of who he is. And I think he worked as a mentor in that way for Hal, because understanding who he is meant I don't have to make a decision all the time, because I'm actually not equipped to make this decision. And he literally says that when I'll let you know when I've got something to say, or I only talk if I've got something to say. I love that, the idea when the dolphin was coming and they're like, oh, what do you think he's here for? And he's like, well, I don't know the guy. How would I know what he's here for? So, and that's true. I mean, the idea of too many cooks in the kitchen. He's like, well, I got nothing to add here, so I'm just not going to bother. But yeah, he was a great character.
Yeah, I liked the idea of, through him in particular, the idea of friendship, and the idea that we had someone that Hal could talk to on a more personal level, rather than having to be that image that everyone expects the king to be. It was nice to see moments throughout that, you know, he's a trusted mentor almost. Like, even he's got all this military experience, and these experiences lead to the ability for Hal to really win in the end. Without bringing John on board, we may not have seen that victory that we see at the end. So I agree with everything you said, and I think very likable character.
Yeah, he's great. I want to talk about William, played by Sean Harris. I really like the fact that something, and this might just be me, but something felt a little bit off about William the whole time, but he kept doing and saying the right thing. So I just let it go. And basically, I think Michod did a great job of making the audience understand where Hal's coming from, because when I was watching this, I was Hal. I had my reservations, but he seemed to be supportive of Hal and speak with logic and rationale, and the idea that war will unite this country if that's what you're trying to do, and those sorts of things. He gained his trust. He said all the right things, but then he slowly slipped his own agenda in. I didn't even notice he was doing it. So how was Hal supposed to notice he was doing it? So I'd actually be curious to see this on a rewatch for some more of the subtle points that he brings up that you might be like, you sneaky snake. Like, so I thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah, very cleverly crafted character that even knowing what he does at the end of this film, you still, as you're watching this character, you still believe that what he's putting forward is in the best interest of most parties involved. So it has a really good ability to disguise the fact of where he's actually going, because it's not pushing it as his agenda. So I think that's probably just repeating what you've said in different words, but I think it was really cleverly crafted.
Very cleverly crafted. Who else did you want to talk about?
I might put in here Lewis the Dolphin here, just Robert Pattinson's character. Probably one of the downfalls in this film. I think that the idea of a sneering, arrogant character is 100% fine, and you need that sort of contrast in leadership styles and characters. But to me, this was more a caricature than anything else, and I just didn't really like it. I think it was too over the top and ridiculous. Like, tried to add humor to a film that is a very serious film, and I think, you know, it sort of reminded me of like Monty Python sketches, like the Knights of Ni, on the castle walls, and I'll fart in your general direction, that sort of stuff. Like, it's okay to have a bit of a weird sort of character that's a little bit trippy and that sort of stuff, but I just think it was a bit over the top for my liking.
I liked him. I thought he was great, and I think I probably didn't feel like he pushed it that far. I think he had this bravado about him. Like, he was absolutely fearless, which made you think like, oh, you know what? They've actually got no chance in this fight, to the point where it's mockery towards him. I kind of like that larger than life version of that character. So I don't know. That worked for me. I didn't have much else to say about the character, but I did like it.
Good. Catherine, I liked the appearance from Catherine towards the end. It was just nice to see, finally, even though it was right at the end of the film, like a strong female voice who was willing to stand for herself as best she could during these times. And in doing that, adds to Hal as a character and makes him more mature and more reasoned. So we barely saw any females in this film at all. And it was just nice that we had that at the end.
Yeah. Wonderful, poignant. We didn't get much of her, but what we got was very, very deliberate portrayal of what role women can play, and sadly probably didn't play back in those days. But it's a nice commentary on what could and should happen.
The only other one I've got there is the dad, like King Henry, the dad, Ben Mendelsohn's character.
Oh, yep.
I just thought that it was nice to see at the start, in particular, that the role was highlighting everything that Hal didn't want to be. Like, he was an invader. He was a man of his word. But as the film progresses, it was really hard for Hal not to fall into those footholds of where his dad had been. So I did like that we got, like, because really they could have started this film as with Hal taking over and being king, and not given that context of the dad dying. They could have done that, really, but they put that in there on purpose to sort of add to this idea of, we've got this young king who's maturing, becoming an adult himself from childhood, and in the back of his mind the whole time, I don't want to be like my father. And they show that hatred, refuses twice to go on his deathbed to see his dad. And it's just a really nice way to sort of develop Hal as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it could even be the case that his father had disengaged so much that he wasn't even making these decisions, because those were decisions that his council was making the whole time. And as soon as Hal stepped in, you notice that this is exactly what they're saying is what we should be doing. Who knows what decisions the first King Henry was actually making.
Yeah, William was around, wasn't he? So
William, but the bloody Archbishop had a lot to say.
True. Yeah, the church had a lot to say in this as well. Director, David Michod. Anything you wanted to mention?
I mean, we've had him on the not had him. We've discussed him on the pod before. Imagine if we had him. I remember in 2010, I think it was, going to see Animal Kingdom at the cinemas, and what a great experience it was seeing just a good, solid Australian film at the movies, and that was kind of his first sort of mark on Hollywood. And off the back of that, he think he made The Rover next, and another good Australian film. And then that one we did on the podcast with Brad Pitt, which I've forgotten the
War
name
Machine.
of. War Machine, yeah. And now this, so no, he's great. David Michod's great.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to mention Animal Kingdom too. Like, obviously the story can translate across the world, because obviously there's a TV series adaptation as well, and I think Michod's worked a little bit producing that as well. So yeah, I'm surprised that this is the last piece of work that like The King, because he hasn't had anything since then. So wonder what he's working on. Surely something.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And Joel Edgerton obviously had a big part in this movie, and he's always been a very busy man trying to sort of further him in his career across all, not just acting, directing. I think he directed that movie Felony that he starred in, Australian movie Felony that he starred in, and he's a great talent and a great advocate for the Australian film industry.
Yeah, good. All right, well, time to talk about some scenes that you enjoyed in this one. Give us some scenes.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned this when you were talking about characters, but the time when Falstaff was talking about how hollow it was winning a battle when you know you've taken a life, and recognizing how hard that actually is. I think it gives you a good insight on John, and probably also Hal as well, but I think it humanizes war a little bit, which some of these movies wouldn't have done in the past. And
yeah, I've sort of combined, like, there's a couple, I think there's like 3 scenes altogether. There's that scene, there's a scene like on the ship, and then a scene by the fire where the conversation between the two, whether it's about war, whether it's about making decisions, friendship, exactly. Just these nice soft moments in between these gritty, horrible war moments. And yeah, I think sort of that guidance too for Hal. I agree. I think they're nice scenes and some good dialogue in there too.
And he was also the one who told him to see his dad in the first place. He's like, you want my advice, just go see him, because you'll regret it if you don't. And that's when you sort of go, this guy's a real mentor to Hal. And not surprisingly, my next scene that I liked chronologically was another scene with Falstaff breaking down the strategy for the battle. It felt to me like when you're watching a sports movie, and like the assistant coach who's never had much to say all of a sudden comes out with this idea, and you're like, oh, that's actually going to hold up. But I think what we know about Sir John is that, I mean, again, it's explicit. It's almost annoying that it's explicit, but you know that he's the kind of guy that doesn't talk unless he's really got something to say. And the fact that he was just so confident about it made me feel like this is going to work. And it was nice, uplifting seeing him actually play his role. Even just seeing it rain that night felt just like, you've got to back this guy in. Funnily enough, I actually years and years ago I was playing cricket with a guy who's he was a bit older than me, and we were playing a game and there was no rain on the radar, and he said, oh, it's going to rain today. It's like, what are you talking about? He goes, honestly, whenever my knee starts aching, it rains. Like, I kid you not, it's the exact same story. And it rained that day and we got washed out. so that's a real thing. I also liked Hal's battle speech. You know, I'm a sucker for a good speech, but really good performance from Chalamet. He really got into the character in this point and really just let it go. I liked that he got off his horse and he walked amongst his soldiers. He wasn't sort of standing in front of everyone saying, look at me, look up to me. It was very passionate delivery, and I think it was really good. These things can be so cheesy and be so hard to get right, but great acting performance in that scene because he nailed it. Cool. And then I've got 2 scenes at the end which kind of tie into one, and they're the 2 main scenes. Obviously, a very important scene with his wife-to-be basically calling him out, making him realize how far he'd changed from his initial endeavors. That's probably the last 15 minutes that made this movie from this was an all right movie to, I see what they're doing. It's actually a really good movie. And that was great seeing, as you've already spoken about it, that female character. I just loved it when he was trying to justify all the decisions that he made and he was getting nowhere. And he said, but the ball, he gave me the ball. It's like, you're the one that said the ball wasn't an issue in the first place. And look at you just like trying to find any reason as to why you did it, because you can't justify it. And I love that. It was really strong. And I just like the way it ended, that moody tone, the reveal that William was behind the assassin and was basically the puppeteer of all of this. And I said that I always felt iffy about him. And I did notice that, you know, Hal was really going against his values that he had at the start of the film. And I was trying to put together like, is this just sort of saying that war makes you grow up fast, or this is the only way to live? But this really cleaned that up. It helped bring back the focus to, hey, we recognize that we've completely changed this character for his morals and his values. and we're going to try and get him back there. It doesn't explain, I don't think, whether William was right or wrong. For all we know, William was probably right to do everything that he did. Maybe that was what was going to unite them. Maybe that was the best thing for England. But I don't think that's the point. It took away from what Hal was, and it took us back there to having the director recognize that we know that we changed his character, but we're going to right this wrong and realize that he didn't mean to change. Like he got taken out of it. He was almost having an out-of-body experience by doing this. And, hopefully we can bring him back. I thought it was great.
And, that's why this film's called The King and not Battle for England or whatever it is, because it's his story. And cool. Yeah, I had that as well towards the end, that the conversation between Catherine and then the questioning the motive and leading to that confrontation. So I had them together as well. I think that it just brings that film together so well.
Real moody end though, wasn't it? Like it was nothing like it started like goes into the credits with the dull tone going through still. It's like, oh, this is nice.
I don't have much else to add. I think any scene where Hal had his shirt off, I'm gonna put as a tick. I liked any shirt with his sense. Why not?
The rig of an 11-year-old boy.
I don't know. There's just something about him. The final battle, I just thought that it was really well done, especially from the moment where John takes his helmet off. The camera goes onto like a high angle shot, looking down on the masses and masses of soldiers around him. This like downfall, and then leading into Lewis. You're ready to fight, and that slip, and it's just like you're a disgrace. You're a disaster. You're not going to win this battle. And finally, the moment with Hal sort of sitting there next to John's body, and he's like crying and just reflecting on their times together. I just really enjoyed that moment. So that was all a part of that final sort of battle scene. So I enjoyed that. Is there anything in this that you didn't like?
I kind of felt that Thomas's death felt very sudden and low key. And it was just like, oh yeah, by the way, you have to be king because he died. It's like, what? So we'd kind of met this character. The brothers had a connection. In my head, I'm like, well, the brother's going to die at some point because we know Hal's going to be king. But it just felt very low key, and it was almost like it was changed in the editing room or something like that. Felt like it should have been a bit more prominent.
Yeah, just a quick off-screen death.
Yeah, it was. Oh no, he died. By the way, didn't you? Yeah, didn't I tell you? I kind of mentioned that. The idea of when they were sort of like setting up for battle. So prior to this, when they were sort of throwing the firebomb things onto that castle, like I was like, oh, this is just another war movie. It was just a bit slow seeing them set up camp and prepare for war and all that. That stuff just is really dull to me. I get that it's important and it kind of has to happen, but I'm just going to call it out anyway. And the other thing I didn't like, and I told you I liked Rob Pattinson in this role, his scene where he was slipping in the mud, I think that was a bit much. Just I get the fact that we want to highlight the fact that this is all about Sir John's decision to fight in the mud, and we're going to have less armor. It was just too in your face. But the thing that really got me with it was him slipping over, almost like, oh, because you slipped over, you lost. Because Hal just got like four of his mates to just kill him, and I felt like. You should kill him. Like I thought this was like a one-on-one. It didn't sit well with me.
Fair, but yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe it's still trying to highlight that Hal as a character isn't a murderer still. That's not where he's at. Don't know.
It felt to me like once you've slipped over, I could have killed you, but I chose not to because you look pathetic. But by the way, you did lose this battle, so we're just going to kill you. Like that's how it felt. But I don't know. It felt strange. I felt like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I just enjoyed like seeing that character, and that's the only thing I'm going to add in the things I didn't like. Anything with him in it, so anything. That's why I liked this moment was because he was gone, he's done, and it was funny how he went out. So I think.
So did you know that they got a stuntman to film him doing that, but they got Robert Pattinson to do it and a stuntman, and they ended up choosing Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, it's funny. It's very
ridiculous.
Funny. All right, what are some themes and some ideas in this one?
I like the idea of unity versus war, and does one lead to another, or can they never coexist? I mean, we don't really know in this story because we're told that if you want unity, you need to have this war. We didn't get to find out how Hal wanted to approach things. But then it's the idea that like I don't think that you're ever really settled in that case after you have a war. So it's interesting that I leave it open, and it certainly makes you think. And have an opinion on it yet, but I enjoy pondering it. And similarly with friendship, can you have friends when you've got so much power? And at what point of the power that you have does that mean you actually no longer have friends? You think of the way that Hal treated John, when he's just like, you do this to me or I will kill you where you stand kind of thing. It's like, well, that's not you. Like, but now that you've got the power, you can say and you can act on that sort of stuff. So, at what point do you lose that? I also like the idea that there were strong female characters, despite their obviously oppressive roles in society and also minimal roles in this film. But you've got Hal's sister, who gave him advice at that very early stage in the film. I like the fact that the bartender, who is one of the very few female characters, held her own in every scene that we saw her in. And she got her money in the end from John. and his wife to be, Catherine obviously laid down the law. Like every single female character in this, in a subtle way, had an enormous role to play. So there's some really cool stuff here that you can pull apart.
Loved all of that, and I've got a whole bunch of other stuff too.
And it's ongoing. Isn't it?
There's so much. It's so good. I think that that idea. I sort of mentioned this a little bit. The idea of growing up and changing your lifestyle, your responsibilities versus your beliefs, and you've sort of touched on this too. That what it means to be king, like the loneliness. How do you have friendship? Who do you trust? And almost the idea, like he wants to be a man, Hal, and that ball that we mentioned before, the reflection of a ball is ideally you're a child, and he's happy to be like, I'm maturing. He's happy to stand up to the church and the clergy who are, I don't understand what you're saying. Just put it in simple terms to me. Like I really appreciated that moment at seeing him sort of grow and be like, this is who I want to be. I want it to be my rule, and you can sort of play along my rules a little bit. Let's work together, sort of thing. And that leads to the politics, the politics between France and England and religion too. These conflicting views. Who do you listen to? What do you believe? That pressure of making the right choice. And, that's where I really enjoyed John, I guess, is that he helped depressurize the situations at times because he could just talk to someone rather than all these people that are involved in the decision making. The idea of war too, like it wasn't glamorized. And sometimes in these movies, you see it glamorized as like, the big buff heroes that are going to come in and save the day. Like it was dirty. It was scary. He talks about being scared. It was sloppy. And, the terror, it's seen through the eyes of the characters, and the human toll of that mass at the end, that huge battle, like all those dead bodies. Like what is it saying about war? It's not a pretty thing, and maybe not necessarily the right choice. And as we see towards the end, Hal's able to reflect on that and be like, did I need to do this? Courage, integrity. Hal tries to do the right thing from the moment he takes the crown. Even when he works out, hey, I've done the wrong thing, he wants to move forward. He's like, I'm going to work with you, Catherine. Let's not do this again. And, acknowledges that his people that he's leading need strength. They need confidence. And even if as he's developing and growing, he doesn't quite have that, he understands I need to put on that persona. Even in those dull moments with John, even if I don't show that necessarily, I show my human side too. We saw through William too, and Hal's dad, the king, the power, manipulation, corruption. These are all things that tie in with war. They all tie in with politics. They all tie in with religion. And finally, the last thing I'll say is David Michod, the director, he sort of made commentary on his connection between all his works. And he sort of said that this film's a continuation of the themes that he's explored in the Animal Kingdom and The Rover and The Machine. Yeah. The idea of delusional men coming to realize the errors of their ways. And we definitely saw that in War Machine. We saw that in, he's the one that said it anyway, but yeah, like that's a really good idea too. The idea of masculinity and working out that there are ways to wrong your rights. Right, you're wrong.
Yeah. I got this so right, I'm going to stuff it up. Yeah. I did read that quote as well, and I loved it because you don't realize it until, because they're effectively I've actually never seen The Rover, but I'm pretty familiar with it. But they're 4 very different films in that sense. And they follow a really important theme. I know Animal Kingdom, that the climax in Animal Kingdom, is basically all about that. And actually, Ben Mendelsohn is electric in Animal Kingdom, and some of that one of those final scenes still just sticks in my head. But he's done a great job to tie that all together, and I wonder if he will try and keep that string, through his later work, because you can still keep it super broad by doing it.
Yeah, good. All right. Sorry, rambled a bit there. What did you take away from this one?
That was great, though. No, it was great hearing you say this, and there's just so much subtext to this entire film. And my big takeaway is almost like a combination of everything we've already said. I like the slightly different angle of a king film. A king who basically got suckered into doing something he didn't want to do, only to discover at the end that it was wrong. And all those themes that we've just spoken about kind of tie into how that story came to be. So that's really cool. It was a point of difference for these kinds of films, which, as I said, I generally do struggle with. I think one thing that will stick in my mind as well is Robert Pattinson's performance. It does stick out. It sticks out of the film, whether you like it or not.
Good. Yeah. The grey sort of color palette for this one, like throughout the whole film, it just gave it that gritty, dirty feel that was really needed, I guess, for this film. Even once they're victorious, they don't, the rain doesn't clear and the sun doesn't shine, that sort of stuff. It's like, yes, it's a victory, but it's a dull victory still. And the focus, it just wasn't on the battle scenes. It wasn't like we spent 5 minutes watching someone do a sword battle. It was about people falling over, people, having to maneuver positions to actually attack people, like this anguish and the filth of the war. And I like that, seeing that rather than a glamorized version, I think, for me.
And isn't that just a whole nother take of this film? Is that this entire film is about taking lives and how it actually feels and the consequences that you have for taking a life. As you said, they won the war and it was never a celebration, because we set up at the start that taking lives is hard to do and it's bad to do, and we just spent a whole film doing it.
All right. Amazing. Yeah. IMDb, did you go on to look at anyone?
I did too. The first one I knew. The first one was Thomas, and I knew that Thomas, played by Dean Charles Chapman, was Tommen from Game of Thrones. But I'm like, I remember seeing him in something else and being like, what the bloody hell? I remember thinking it was Tommen, all the other thing, and he was in 1917, of course. He's got a bit of a take for the movies that he's in. But do you know, obviously, real baby face, he's 24 years old and he looks like he's about 14. So
there's a funny thing, right? I did exactly the same thing. Yeah. I'm like, Game of Thrones, know that. What else have I seen him in? And then I was like, when I looked it up, I'm like, I did this exact same thing when I watched it the first time. The exact same thing. I'm like, I'm sure I've done this before. It didn't work. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
The other one was Hal's sister, who's Philippa, Queen of Denmark, played by Thomasin McKenzie. As soon as I saw that name, I'm like, yeah, that's a familiar name. She's in Old, the M. Night Shyamalan movie from last year. Also the main girl in Jojo Rabbit as well.
Oh, cool. That's a good one.
Yeah, that was a good one.
All right, question time. Did you? That was me. I just looked up
just Thomas.
Tom and Dude. Yeah. Any questions that you want to ask?
I have one question that I kind of asked when I was talking about the themes, but I didn't let you really answer. And the idea, is there a balance between power and friendship?
It's a real tricky thing to try and maneuver, I guess, because if you're in a workplace and you've got a really good friend and then they become your boss, like how does that play out? It's a real hard thing. You don't really want to have an equal relationship with a friend. If you're going to call them a friend, you want equality across everything that you've got. So I think it's a real tricky thing to try and work out. Not saying that you should get rid of any friends that have any power over you, but you want to have a balance in that relationship.
Yeah, and the idea, he said, when you're a kid, you don't have any friends. It's like, well, you kind of don't, like, because you're in charge of everyone.
It's true, yeah. And any decision you make could impact your friend in a negative way. So what's that friendship like? Are they going to lie to you? Are they going to tell you the truth? You've stuffed up. What are they going to say?
I don't think I want to be a king. Yeah, it's not appealing to me.
Maybe not. This one's a little bit of left of field. We both watched the Colin directed Tragedy of Macbeth, the recent one.
Yes.
So that's obviously a Shakespearean language adaptation. Did you appreciate, because this, and in a lot of these epic war films, they talk in the lingo of the times. Did you appreciate that this was more recent language? I think it worked. I liked it.
I mean, Shakespeare's such a leap, right? That the language is so specific. I think it's almost better to use The Northman as an example, which we both watched recently, which is almost in between the two, right? You've got Shakespeare, which is, poetry from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, versus The Northman, which was made this year, written this year, and uses a combination of sort of ye old dialogue, Nordic dialogue, but things like that. And this is just normal how we speak right now. I think I can appreciate. I think the Shakespeare thing is hard, and that is something that is a reason why people would not see a film. So I appreciate it in that length. But then you think of like The Northman versus this, which kind of does it a little bit without overdoing it. I think there's a niceness to that takes you into that place. But with that said, this is an adaptation of what is an entirely fictional story that we haven't heard before. So it kind of makes sense for them to have the modern day language.
Yeah, good answer. I like it. And you mentioning The Northman sort of leads me into something else I was going to say. Like, The Northman, sort of these big epic films, really. And these, like the 50s and the 60s, Spartacus, Ben-Hur, all those big films, that was what were the groundbreaking sort of thing. Got people into cinemas. And I sort of wanted to, it's not really a question, and I know studios are very reserved with their budgets, and especially the last couple of years trying to save money and stuff. But would you appreciate seeing more of these like big films so people get to the cinemas?
I mean, it's ironic that we're talking about this in a movie that was Netflix original, but
I know.
I don't know. I don't know if it would get people to the cinemas. I think we're in a different world now where franchises
superhero films
people
like
to the cinemas.
The new,
it's almost like you need to know the IP to commit to going to the movies, which is what it is. I mean, I think I appreciate the fact that we do have a lot of streaming services and smaller studios that are still making lots of films, and we've still got ample amount of movies available to us. But I'd still love the cinema experience. And the difference with me is I don't think I'd necessarily go to the cinema just because it's a big film. I just go to the cinema if I want to see it. Although with all that said, I want to make sure I see the new Jurassic World movie in VMAX on a big screen with an audience. So yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah. And like the same Avatar 2, like the end of this year, based on all the early talk, like this is a visual experience that you need to see on a big screen. So, and obviously this was a Netflix film, but they did do a theatrical run beforehand. So, I mean, this, like we said when we saw The Northman, like seeing that on a screen at home, like the sound and like, it's just such an immersive experience that I think it's not like, yes, we love a good indie film. We love a good film with themes and ideas that doesn't necessarily have to be seen on the big screen. Whereas these types of films, I think if you want people to go to the cinema, it's just such a good experience.
Yeah. Avatar 2 is going to be an interesting social experiment in that sense. I think like it'll be so hard to argue that you'll get a similar experience at home watching it. But then again, it is a franchise as well. So we kind of lose that argument of whether that's what drew them in or because they've already seen the first one and they're happy to see that there's a little bit more to it. But I mean, I'll be seeing Avatar at the cinema, no doubt whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. We ready to wrap this up?
I think so.
Good, let's do it. So we finalise with a rating out of 5 to come up with an average. What are your final thoughts for this one?
In general, I thought The King did a lot right to keep my attention for. It was a pretty chunky runtime. It set up a really calm and careful protagonist that initially dragged me in, and I feel like I rolled with all the punches alongside him. I thought Joel Edgerton was great. I enjoyed the moody and thoughtful conclusion. I think that really stood out, despite the fact that I got a little bit worn down from the battle scenes and the war discussion. But this is still 3.5 stars for me.
Nice, good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I like the characters, especially how it looks fantastic for really how much was spent on it. It has so much to say. I mean, and I know you mentioned like the bit of a slog time. Like, was it about 2 hours 20?
220, yeah.
220, yeah. Realistically, like this could have even been longer than what it was. So to me, I'm almost like thinking maybe like this is maybe a perfect edit. yeah, I don't know. But
Yeah,
hey,
it did well for its runtime. Was my comment. Yeah,
like because sometimes a 2-hour movie like Astro, I'm like, oh, I'm checking how long to go, and even on a rewatch for this one, it was just like it just sped through. I just was into it. So my original, I'm giving this a 4.5 still. I really enjoy this film. So 4.5 out of 5 for me, which gives us a 4 average, which is probably about right.
Pretty good. Yeah, 4.5 is a big score, man.
Yeah, I know.
Good. I like giving big scores.
I was reconsidering being like, do I need to bring it down? But I was like, no. I still, if I can rewatch a film and still be as engaged as I was the first time I watched it, and still take away as much from it as we did. And this discussion's been great. I've really enjoyed this. So, yeah, sticking with 4.5.
That says a lot. That's good.
Yeah, we're on socials. We've got Twitter, we've got Facebook and Instagram. Give us a follow. Just a random question for people. What's your favorite Shakespeare piece? What's your favorite Shakespeare? It's a hard one.
Midsummer Night's Dream for me.
Lovely. Should have gone with one of the romance ones for you. That doesn't surprise me. I guess I'm gonna go with the. I'm gonna go with the Merchant of Venice.
Okay, I thought you were gonna say
Venice. The Moor. Shakespeare's got so much good stuff. His birthday is actually the same birth date as me. Obviously different years. But,
is that right?
Yeah. That's
maybe you are Shakespeare reincarnate. Maybe he's had a few lives in between, but maybe that's where he landed.
I doubt it highly. I think his sophistication with the language is a lot better than my ums and ahs. And
have you seen the movie? Have you seen the movie Anonymous, where basically claims that Shakespeare was a fraud?
Oh yeah, well,
he was. I haven't seen the movie. He was the front man. He was the front man for one of the dukes or something.
All right. Well, we're done for this week, but next week we're back. We have another 2019 film. It's an international film. It's an Italian film, and it's classified as a modern fairy tale called The Man Without Gravity, or in Italian, L'uomo senza gravità. It's directed by Marco Bonfatti. It stars Elio Germano, Michaela Sescon, and Elena Cotta. That's what we've got next week.
The title alone fascinates me of this movie, so I'm actually looking forward to it.
Me too. I'm very, very keen for this one, so I'm looking forward to it. Wonderful. As always, thank you. It's been good, and I don't know, it's just nice to talk about movies.
Yeah, that was a good one, and I think we even branched out from this movie to talk about the idea of movies in general and where they all sit. So that was fun.
Good. All right, I will see you next week.
You will.